It began with a letter taped to my front door. The envelope carried the HOA's seal, and inside was a notice declaring that my house's color was out of compliance with community standards. I had painted it a soft gray the year before, a color I believed was tasteful and modern. But according to the HOA, it wasn't one of their approved options. The notice demanded I repaint within 30 days or face escalating fines. At first, I was frustrated, but as I reread the letter, a different idea began to take shape in my mind. The HOA's approved palette was tucked neatly inside the notice. I flipped through the options, expecting at least a reasonable variety. Instead, I found a collection of outdated shades that looked like they belonged in the 1970s. There were bland beiges, sickly greens, and one particularly awful HOA muddy, mustard-like yellow, that stood out for all the wrong reasons. It was technically approved, but it was hideous. I smiled to myself as I circled that color with a pen. If the HOA wanted me to follow the rules, I'd follow them to the letter, just not in the way they expected. Over the next week, I hired a crew to repaint the house. Neighbors peeked curiously as the cans of mustard yellow paint arrived. By the second day, the transformation was in full swing. The once modern gray walls were slowly being swallowed by the jarring yellowish tone. Cars slowed as they passed by, some drivers even stopping to stare. By the time the last coat dried, my house looked like a giant condiment bottle sitting in the middle of the street. I stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching in satisfaction. The HOA had demanded compliance. Now they were about to regret it. It didn't take long for the backlash to begin. Neighbors complained almost immediately, calling the new color blinding, ugly, and embarrassing for the neighborhood. But when the HOA arrived to inspect, they had no grounds to object. The board members flipped through their binder, scanning the palette, and reluctantly confirmed that my shade of mustard yellow was indeed listed. Their frowns deepened, but they couldn't issue fines or demand a repaint. I had obeyed the rules perfectly. They left in frustration, muttering under their breath. Meanwhile, I could see some neighbors smirking. Clearly entertained by how I had outplayed the HOA, the complaints piled up at the HOA office. Homeowners wrote angry emails, demanding action. Some even attended meetings to protest the eyesore on Maple Street. But every time, the board had to admit their hands were tied. My house, as hideous as it was, complied fully with their regulations. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. People who had once blindly supported the HOA now started questioning the logic of its outdated rules. My mustard yellow house had become a symbol of both defiance and compliance, sparking whispered conversations at mailboxes and heated debates at community gatherings. The pressure was mounting. The HOA tried subtle intimidation. They sent me friendly reminders about lawn maintenance, trash bin placement, and even mailbox alignment. But I kept everything spotless, trimmed, and perfectly within regulations. They had no leverage. Neighbors began noticing how obsessively the board targeted me, and sympathy shifted in my favor. Some joked that the ugly yellow house was the highlight of the street. Others quietly thanked me for exposing the HOA's pettiness. The board grew more desperate. Holding emergency meetings to discuss possible amendments, it was clear they wanted me gone, but they were trapped by their own official palette. Eventually, the HOA scheduled a vote to remove the mustard yellow shade from the approved list. Word spread quickly, and the turnout was higher than any meeting in years. Many residents, tired of the HOA's overreach, voted against the change, not because they liked my house color, but because they didn't want the board rewriting rules every time someone found a loophole. The motion failed spectacularly. The HOA members looked defeated, realizing their authority had been undercut. My mustard yellow house still stood, legally untouchable, and now more than ever. It represented a win for homeowners tired of micromanagement. Months passed and the outrage slowly faded. People grew used to my mustard yellow house, and eventually it became a quirky neighborhood landmark. New visitors would laugh and ask about the yellow house, and longtime residents would tell the story of how the HOA had been beaten at its own game. My victory wasn't about the paint itself, it was about proving a point. The HOA had tried to force me into compliance, but I showed them that blind authority can backfire when pushed too far. In the end, the ugliest color in the palette turned out to be my strongest weapon.